Okay, but I wanted to look with you at the prophet Habakkuk. Now, Habakkuk, one of the minor prophets, we know nothing about Habakkuk apart from what is in the book that bears his name. What's important is that he was a prophet. All right, that is significant, as chapter 1, verse 1 specifies, meaning he was an inspired spokesman of God. So he delivers the word of God first in his particular circumstance, and then to all of God's people through the ages through what he had said in his particular circumstance. Now, most scholars are convinced that Habakkuk, he prophesied in the latter part of the 7th century BC. So you know how this works when you're going BC, you're coming the other way. So you have from 700 down to 600, that's the 7th century. So we're going to be down toward the 600 side. So most scholars think in the latter part of the 7th century, and that makes him then a contemporary of Jeremiah and Zephaniah. But more specifically, it seems that Habakkuk prophesied in a very small window between 608 and 605 BC. And there are reasons you can calculate this and figure out why that's the most likely time. But O. Palmer Robertson, in his commentary, he says, the net result of this analysis places the prophecy of Habakkuk in the days of the reign of Jehoiakim, probably between the years of 608 and 605. This view, in its essence, has been adopted by a number of scholars. It appears to satisfy all the various aspects that need to be considered. So when you're working on this kind of thing, trying to figure out when was it, you have these different clues. And when you put them all together, it seems this window of 608 to 605 is the best, most likely time of when Habakkuk is prophesying. Now, you may recall that the good Judean king, Josiah was killed by Pharaoh Necho II near Megiddo in 609 BC. And after he was killed in that battle, the people of Judea, they made Josiah's son Shallum. They made him king, and they gave him the throne name Jehoahaz. But he only reigned for 3 months because Necho comes back. So Necho's going north. Josiah comes over. He's killed by Necho. Necho continues on his campaign north. They put Jehoahaz on the throne, but when Necho comes back, he deposes Jehoahaz. He removes him and he puts another of Josiah's sons, Eliakim, on the throne, and he gives him the name Jehoiakim. So that's how Jehoiakim comes to the throne. And Scripture says of Jehoiakim, this king who was put on the throne by Necho, Scripture says that he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Indeed, he oppressed the people of Judah. He oppressed them through forced labor and murder. And he murdered at least one of the prophets who opposed him. So let's say, so here's a prophet coming to speak on God's behalf, and this king has him killed because kings do not always like, not only kings, people do not always like the message of God. And when you have the power to kill the one delivering the message like a king does, that sometimes happens, but it says something about the heart of this king, this heart of Jehoiakim. So Habakkuk may have faced some of that pressure, right? Habakkuk's prophesying right at this time. Jehoiakim will kill prophets. So he's in the midst of a very difficult situation in Judah, an evil situation. So we have that superscription that I'd read to you, the prophecy that Habakkuk the prophet, or the oracle, your translation may say, that the prophet, that Habakkuk the prophet received. And then in verses 2 through 4 of chapter 1, Habakkuk says, remember his situation and circumstance, things are wicked in Judah. He says, how long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice Why do you tolerate wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted. So Habakkuk here, living in this situation and circumstance, he questions why God has not intervened. Why he has not intervened to deal with the evil, the violence, and the injustice that are rampant in Judah. And he's bothered, see, because this apparent failure to act, it seems inconsistent with the nature of God. You see, this has larger implications. The fact God has not acted in this circumstance raises these questions because it seems inconsistent with his nature. How can an all-knowing, all-powerful, and righteous God simply ignore such a situation? Right? You're tempted to think, well, maybe he's not aware of it. Maybe he's not all-knowing. Right? Well, maybe he's unable to do anything about it. Right? Maybe he's not all-powerful, or maybe he just doesn't care. Maybe he's not righteous. You see, so these kinds of things raise these questions. There are devotional implications to these kinds of situations. And this is the question. Whenever you hear anyone say, or you yourself say, how can God, and then fill in the blank. How can God do this? How can he allow this? How can this go on? That's the same question that is being raised, and it has the same devotional implications. God, are you there? Are you aware? Are you able? Are you righteous? What is going on? And in 5 through 11, God responds. He says, look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For I'm going to do something in your days that you would not believe even if you were told. I am raising up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings not their own. They are a feared and dreaded people. They are a law to themselves and promote their own honor. Their horses are swifter than leopards, fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their cavalry gallops headlong. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like an eagle swooping to devour. They all come intent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind and gather prisoners like sand. They mock kings and scoff at rulers. They laugh at all fortified cities. By building earthen ramps, they capture them. Then they sweep past like the wind and go on. Guilty people whose own strength is their God. So God responds to Habakkuk, and he reveals to him that his dilemma is a false one. It only appears, you see, from Habakkuk's limited perspective that God is ignoring the wickedness in Judah. That God doesn't care about it, has no idea about it, or those kinds of things. That's only because his perspective is very limited. The truth of the matter is that God is in the process of addressing the situation. He's already at work dealing with the circumstance. He's raising up the Babylonians to be his agents. And they will take care of the problem of Judean evil and injustice. The problem that had Habakkuk crying out. They will be God's instrument of wrath against Judah. Now, the ancient kingdom of Babylonia began a new rise to power. They had once been a great entity, empire, but they began a new rise to power starting in 626 under the king Nabopolassar. And so this was a gradual thing where they're coming to power. And in 612, you start to see them flexing, getting more. God is raising them up. 612, the Babylonians, assisted by the Medes, they destroyed Nineveh, which was the capital of the Assyrian Empire. And then when the Babylonians and their allies took the city of Haran in 610 BC, the Assyrian Empire was at that point effectively finished. Barring some kind of retaking of Haran or some kind of counterattack or something, they were essentially finished. And the question at that point was whether Egypt or the Babylonians would rule Palestine and Syria. Okay, the Babylonians are to the north, the Egyptians are to the south, Palestine and Syria, this strip in here. So when the Babylonians, when they win at Haran, it's clear the Assyrians are in dire straits. So who's going to be the ultimate dominant power? Who is going to control Palestine and Syria? And Josiah was killed in 609 BC when he confronted Necho. The Egyptians were going up to assist the Assyrians in their attempt to recapture the city of Haran. That's what Necho was doing. And so he's going that way, and Josiah comes over and confronts him, and he was probably trying to prevent the Egyptians from coming to the aid of the Assyrians. You see, apparently fearing Egypt more as the dominant power than he feared the more distant Babylonians. So he comes and that's when he's killed near Megiddo. As I said, Necho then puts Josiah's son Eliakim on the throne, and he renames him Jehoiakim. And then in 605 BC, which is not long after Habakkuk's prophecy, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, who was then, at that point, he was the crown prince, he soundly defeated the Egyptians at a famous battle called Carchemish, at a place called Carchemish. So the question was, who's going to rule Palestine? So now we have this famous battle where Nebuchadnezzar defeats the Egyptians at Carchemish, which establishes the Babylonians then as the undisputed dukes, the undisputed dominant power, and therefore the rulers of Palestine and Syria. And that battle, by the way, the Battle of Carchemish, that battle is recounted in the Babylonian Chronicle. It's also referred to in Jeremiah chapter 46, verse 2. And Nebuchadnezzar, he became the king of Babylonia that same year in 605 BC. Now, Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 informs us that Nebuchadnezzar, or possibly subordinates of his at his direction, Nebuchadnezzar came against Jerusalem in 605 BC. This is when Daniel is taken, and Daniel's partners, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is when they're all taken, and other things were taken there. So from Jerusalem at that time, so they're taken there, and he came against Jerusalem presumably because Jehoiakim was pro-Egyptian, right? Jehoiakim had been placed on the throne by Necho. And so in 605, after the success here at this battle, he comes against Jerusalem and he deposes, he removes that king, he takes him, he removes him from the throne, and so he takes tribute. He doesn't remove him, he takes tribute from Jehoiakim in the form of people and cultic articles. That's Daniel and those, right? And he's taken all this stuff from them. Now, it's also, in fact, you see in 2 Chronicles 36, 5 through 8, that Jehoiakim, who was the pro-Egyptian ruler, he left him there. He was a pro-Egyptian ruler. In 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verses 5 through 8, say that Jehoiakim was either himself deported to Babylonia or he was threatened with deportation. Now, if he was in fact deported, it had to be just for a little while, and the purpose would have then to flex. He would have deported him there, taken him there, and said, "Don't mess with me." You understand? This is your fate. Okay, so I don't know if he was just threatened with it or if he's actually taken there. But anyway, he remains on the throne. And then some years later, he rebels against Nebuchadnezzar. You see that in 2 Kings 24:1. And that then leads to this invasion. I'm going through this to say, he says, what are you doing about what's happening here? I'm raising up the Babylonians. What do the Babylonians have to do with what's going here? I'm going to show you what they're doing to Judah. The Babylonians come up, and do they have anything to do? Oh, they do. Starting in 605, they come. Away goes Daniel. Away go these cultic articles. Okay? That's the first invasion. And then we have this king who rebels. Jehoiakim rebels, and that leads to a huge invasion by Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, in 598 and 597. And Jehoiakim, that's when Jehoiakim dies, right at that time when Nebuchadnezzar is coming there. And then he is succeeded by his son Jehoiakim, and Jehoiakim promptly then surrenders to the Babylonians to avoid complete destruction of Jerusalem. So that's something, right? You're here at an attack, you become king, he's just there for a little bit, just in time to surrender, to say, hey, don't completely level the city. I have no way of fighting against you, so here. So he surrenders there, and he and the royal family and a large portion of the Judean elite, they were then led into exile. So we have 605, we have 598, 597, and then Nebuchadnezzar appoints Jehoiakim's uncle Zedekiah to be the new king of Judah. And he too eventually rebels against Nebuchadnezzar. He rebels against him, which led to the destruction of Jerusalem in 587, 586. That's the one that when we studied Lamentations, that's the big one. You know, that's when the city's leveled. So you have 605, 598, 597, and then the hammer comes down in 587, 586. So when God says to Habakkuk, hey, I'm raising up the Babylonians. You're concerned about all this evil and stuff? I got it. I'm taking care of it, you see. So Habakkuk, you see, he can't recognize God's work because, as so often happens, God's work is being done in a time frame and in a manner that doesn't fit his expectations. You see, he's got this idea, hey, come take care of this, and he has his own concept of how God should take care of the problem. He doesn't seem to be doing it, so there's some problem. What are you doing? Do you not know about it? Are you unable to do anything about it? No, he knows about it, but he's working on it in a time frame. You see, in a time frame, in a manner that is outside of your expectation of how God should work. He has his own way of doing things, and we simply are not equipped to sit in judgment of God. We are finite, limited, bent, fallen people. And it is absolute arrogance of us to sit in judgment of the holy and righteous God who created all things, the infinite one. But we wind up doing that all the time. So whenever circumstances tempt us to doubt the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we can know that we are victims of our finiteness in that. Chapter 1:12 to 2:1. So here's Habakkuk's second lament or complaint. Now, I got to say something here, footnote on verse 12. I have rendered verse 12 in keeping with the insights of an Old Testament scholar named J.J.M. Roberts, in that I have taken all four of the clauses as questions instead of simply the first clause of verse 12. That's legit, and I think it fits the context better. Second thing in a footnote is when it says, my God, my Holy One, you will never die. There's a textual issue there. Was the original you will never die, or was the original we will never die? Okay, I am with those who think it's you. For example, the NRSV, NIV, Christian Standard Bible. So I solved that textual issue. I think it's more likely the original's here. Okay, is you. All right. That said, O Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die, will you? O Lord, have you appointed them to execute judgment? O rock, have you ordained them to punish? Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? You've made people like the fish in the sea, like sea creatures that have no ruler. The wicked foe pulls all of them up with hooks. He catches them in his net. He gathers them up in his dragnet. And so he rejoices and is glad. Therefore he sacrifices to his net and burns incense to his dragnet. For by his net he lives in luxury and enjoys the choicest food. Is he to keep on emptying his net, destroying nations without mercy? I'll stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I'll look to see what he will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint. So God's solution to Habakkuk's first complaint, his first lament, that your complaint, it's a false dilemma. It only seems to you like I'm ignoring these things because of your limited perspective. Well, his response here then creates an even bigger problem. He says, look, how can God ignore the greater wickedness of the Babylonians to use them as his instruments to punish Judah? You see, since Yahweh is the eternal God, the true God, the holy God, not some lesser deity, since he is the true God, Habakkuk questions whether he's missed something. Am I getting this right? Have you appointed them to execute judgment? Oh, rock, have you ordained them to punish? Is there's something not fitting for me? And have I missed something here? To the Babylonians, you see, people, they're like fish and other rulerless creatures in that they are ruthlessly captured. Right? The way the Babylonians ruthlessly capture people like people capture fish. They're captured that way and they rejoice over them as a source of luxury because they take everything they have. Right? So this is what they're doing. That's why the Babylonians worship the means by which they capture those things. That is why they worship military might. Because that is the key to their luxury. They're going out and they're conquering and taking all of this stuff from all of these people. And Habakkuk wants to know if this is the full answer. Is that it? I mean, are we finished here? Is that the full answer? Is Babylonia just going to keep on destroying nations in perpetuity? Is that how this is going to be? If so, it just doesn't seem right. And so he then declares he's going to wait for an answer. I've laid this out there, and I'm not going to go anywhere until I get an answer to this, and then I will know what to tell to others about this complaint. What am I going to do? And then he says that, he's going to wait for this answer. And then God announces to him that he's going to give him an explanatory vision. He says here in 2 and 3, then the Lord replied, write down the vision and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it. For the vision awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. So God instructs Habakkuk to clearly record the vision that he is going to give him. Okay, not simply an oracle. He's going to give him a vision. And he says, when I give you that vision, he doesn't give him the vision until chapter 3. But he's going to give him a vision. He tells him to clearly record that vision. And he says that the vision he's going to give him, it relates to a future time. It relates to an appointed future time that God has set out here. And the vision will certainly come to pass. And that vision that he's going to give him, it must be trusted even though the fulfillment of the vision seems delayed. I know it's going to happen in the delay. You're going to be tempted to think it's not going to happen, and I'm telling you, though it linger, wait for it. You can take it to the bank. Okay? Though there's going to be a delay, even though, I want you to hold fast to this during that time. And then you have in verses 4 and 5, you have the righteous are contrasted with the arrogant Babylonians. See, he is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous will live by his faith. Indeed, wine betrays him. He's arrogant and never at rest, because he is as greedy as the grave, and like death is never satisfied. He gathers to himself all the nations and takes captive all the peoples. So the Babylonians, you see, these guys with their arrogant spirit, they consider themselves above God's judgment. Right? They are not concerned in the least. In the pride of their present strength. This is how we are. Things are rolling for this country. Nobody can stop us. We are on a roll. We are the kings, the ultimate power. Who can defeat us? We eat gods for lunch. Nothing can stop us, you see. And in the pride of that present strength, they have no thought of being accountable to God. Not even on their radar screen. We are rocking and we're doing what we want to do. But the righteous, you see, the righteous are different. The righteous will not be similarly deceived about the Babylonians' future. You see, they have no idea of being accountable to God. They don't care about any of that stuff. They're just rolling. But the righteous person will not be similarly deceived about their future. The righteous person will live by faith in God's character and in his word, however things may appear. Right? However things may look, they will trust in God's character and in his word, trusting that the judge of all the earth will do right. Right? Even when, I'm looking around, I'm going, how's this going to happen? How's this going to work? I don't know. I don't know. But they're going to trust in who God is, and they're going to trust that he will do right and he will do what he says. They will conduct themselves in accordance with that faith. They will live consistently with that faith, with that conviction of who God is and the fact that he will do what he says he will do. And they will be given life because of that faith. So he's contrasting the faithful, the righteous, from the arrogant Babylonians. And we have to live by a similar faith. We must not allow, you see, circumstances and appearances to shake our faith in God's character and his word. God is who he says he is, and he will do what he says he will do, even when it doesn't look like it. Right? Even when you're in the storms of life and things, you sit there saying, this looks terrible. How's this going to happen? God is who he says he is, and he will do what he says he will do. If we trust in him, we trust in him throughout our lives, we will be given eternal life in the consummated kingdom of God. Tremper Longman and Raymond Dillard, they say, although we live in a present evil age, the righteous will live by faith. Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. The ancients were commended for their believing God when the circumstances all conspired to say that such faith would not be rewarded. We too are called to that same life of faith. For God will yet come as divine warrior and will vindicate his name. You see, it doesn't always look that way. Sometimes you look like you're just being foolish. Look how you're living in those things. We're over here. We're partying, baby. We're doing all the stuff. We only live once. God God is who God says he is, and he will be faithful to his word. Now, the fate of the Babylonians, the fate to which they and the unbelieving, the unrighteous are blind. He then reports that. This isn't the vision yet. This is his report of their faith, and he says in 6-20, will not all of them taunt him and with ridicule and scorn, saying, woe to him who piles up stolen goods and makes himself wealthy by extortion? How long must this go on? Will not your creditors suddenly arise? Will they not wake up and make you tremble? Then you will become their prey. Because you've plundered many nations, the people who are left will plunder you. For you've shed human blood. You've destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Woe to him who builds his house by unjust gain, setting his nest on high to escape the clutches of ruin. You've plotted the ruin of many people, shaming your own house and forfeiting your life. The stones of the wall will cry out, and the beams of the woodwork will echo it. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and establishes a town by injustice. Has not the Lord Almighty determined that the people's labor is only fuel for the fire, that the nations exhaust themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbors, pouring it from the wineskin till they're drunk so that he can gaze on their naked bodies. You will be filled with shame instead of glory. Now it is your turn. Drink and let the nations and let your nakedness be exposed. The cup from the Lord's right hand is coming around to you, and disgrace will cover your glory. The violence you have done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and your destruction of animals will terrify you. For you have shed human blood, you have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Of what value is an idol carved by a craftsman, or an image that teaches lies? For the one who makes it trusts in his own creation. He makes idols that cannot speak. Woe to him who says to wood, come to life, or to lifeless stone, wake up. Can it give guidance? It is covered with gold and silver. There's no breath in it. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. So the nations will taunt the Babylonians. They will taunt them over the judgment that God is going to bring on them. You see, they will taunt them, ridicule, scorn. You tremble, become their prey. They will plunder you. Woe to him, woe to him, woe to him. You'll be filled with shame instead of glory. The cup from the Lord's hand is coming around to you. The violence you've done will overwhelm you. You see, this is going to be the fate of the Babylonians. You see, and why is that? Because God, the true and living God, Yahweh, is not like these little gods that you're worshiping. These little demonic portals you have through these images. He's not like that. They don't do anything. They don't control anything. He is on his throne as the true and living God, and he controls the course of history. This is happening because he is on the throne and he is determined it's going to happen. Right? So he's the one there. He's not like one of these idols. He is on his throne and he will judge Babylonia for its evil and for its wickedness. So Habakkuk's second dilemma is also a false one. His second dilemma is a false one. God is not ignoring the greater wickedness of the Babylonians. It's not like, hey, I didn't know about it. They slipped that by me. I didn't know. It's not like that at all. He's perfectly aware, fully aware of their evil, their wickedness and their arrogance. And they will receive their due. They will receive their due in spades. You see, but first, they will serve God's purpose regarding Judah. First, they are going to be the solution that Habakkuk was crying out at the beginning. How in the world can you let these people go on? I'm living in a cesspool. And you've turned a blind eye to it. No, I haven't. I'm dealing with it. They're going to be the instrument. And then after that, they'll be taken care of. So then we have a prayer from the prophet in verses 1 and 2, where he says, Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds. Lord, repeat them in our day, in our time, make them known. In your wrath, remember mercy. So this is a prayer, you see, for God to bring about the judgment that he just described, that he just revealed, where you're going to see all of the nations taunting the Babylonians for how great, how the mighty have fallen. And so this is his prayer for that. And then the promised vision that he told him to write down. Now he gives him the vision. And he says in 3-15, God came from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. His glory covered the heavens and his praise filled the earth. His splendor was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand where his power was hidden. Plague went before him. Pestilence followed his steps. He stood and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains crumbled, and the age-old hills collapsed. You see, this is an image of a theophany of God entering in, where all of these things start to convulse and collapse. And you see, he says, but he marches on forever. I saw the tents of Cushan in distress, the dwellings of Midian in anguish. Were you angry with the rivers, Lord? Was your wrath against the streams? Did you rage against the sea when you rode your horses and your chariots to victory? Everything is convulsing. Rivers, seas. It's all in turmoil. He says, you uncovered your bow. You called for many arrows. You split the earth with rivers. The mountains saw you and writhed. Torrents of water swept by. The deep roared and lifted its waves on high. Sun and moon stood still in the heavens at the glint of your flying arrows, at the lightning of your flashing spear. You see, this is all symbolism. This is a vision, is an image of incredible judgment. You see, it says, in wrath you strode to the earth, and in anger you threshed the nations. You came out to deliver your people, to save your anointed one. You crushed the leader of the land of wickedness. You stripped him from head to foot. With his own spear, you pierced his head when his warriors stormed out to scatter us, gloating as though about to devour the wretched who were in hiding. You trampled the sea with your horses, churning the great waters. So here's this vision that he told him to write down and send out. The vision that he says, though it linger, you wait for it. Because I'm telling you, you can take this to the bank. What he has just here revealed to him. And then we see Habakkuk's response to this vision that God has given him. And that's why I always say, like people like that old New Yorker cartoon who, like the guy straightening his tie, prepare to meet your God. Like, no big deal. I'm getting ready to meet God. No big deal, not so tough. It's nothing like that. Okay? God can't be clearer to tell you. He is an awesome God. And you don't want to stand before him in judgment. Habakkuk, just from seeing the vision, having that vision given to him, the vision is so powerful, he says, I heard and my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones and my legs trembled. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nation invading us. Though the fig tree doesn't bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, do you see how dire that is? There's going to be a time, a season of difficulty and suffering and hardship. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to endure all of that because I know who God is and what he has promised me. I'm going to cling to that. He says, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to go on the heights. So when you look at this just physically, he is shaken by this vision. It is awesome to come before God. This prophet is trembling just from seeing it. What he's doing to the Babylonians. He's physically shaken. And then he says, see, that by God's power, he will wait patiently despite the circumstances. And if we could hold on to this, you see, because in all of the storms of life, contrary to what these people, these TV preachers tell people, that when you become a Christian, you're insulated from all these difficulties and all that, and God buys you a Cadillac and all goes well. You are not pulled out of life. We live in this world. And this world has difficulties. It has mourning and death and sorrow and all of those things. But you and I look beyond that. We look here, all of these circumstances, the hardship and difficulties that he's describing. But we look beyond that because we live by faith. We know who God is. We trust he is who he has told us he is, and he will do what he has said he will do. You look around and say, well, I don't see it. I don't doubt you don't see it. But you have his word that tells you it, and you need to hold on to that. You hold on to that through all of the difficulties of life. And that's the message here. You see, that's the message that he gives us. And of course, historically, the fulfillment of this came when the Babylonian Empire fell very swiftly. In 539 BC, when Cyrus the Great, who happened to be prophesied in advance by name, when Cyrus the Great came and brought the Persians and the Medes against the Babylonians, you see in Daniel. But this is history. So 539 BC, the Babylonians get it. You see, God has said he doesn't move in our time frames and those kinds of things, but he is who he says he is, and he will do what he has promised to, and you live your life with that. Don't let these things shake you off that. Again, hold that truth like a mad dog. Heard that bell, thanks.